I was betrayed by the person I trusted most, and what I discovered changed everything in my life. It all began on a seemingly ordinary morning, but one that left the ground beneath my feet. I was sitting in the kitchen, clutching my coffee mug like a shield against the world, when I realized something was wrong. My fiancée, Bianca, hadn't responded to my texts or phone. The feeling that something was about to shatter my entire life slowly engulfed me. The silence in the apartment seemed to scream. I never imagined I would be betrayed like this by the love of my life, and in a way that involved my own brother. I was about to discover the full extent of this pain, and it would come cruelly and unexpectedly. I was 32 years old, a forensic accountant, someone who had always believed in justice, but never imagined that justice would first strike against the heart. My name is Eduardo, and until now, I've lived a relatively quiet life. I work with numbers, investigate irregularities, and spend my life observing details that no one else notices. I've always thought I had control of my personal life. My parents, Helena and Carlos, have always clearly favored my brother Rafael, and I've learned to live with it. But I thought I could protect my feelings. I never imagined betrayal could come so close, so deeply. Bianca, the woman I promised to love, was now engaged to Rafael, and my parents, especially my mother, pressured me to attend the wedding as if I were just another guest. As if my pain didn't matter. The impact of the betrayal wasn't just emotional. Every visit to the bank account, every suspicious movement, every document I analyzed made me realize that Rafael and Bianca were involved in fraud in the family business. My heart ached, but my mind, trained to details and irregularities, wouldn't stop. The initial shock gave way to anger, and anger mixed with a sense of abandonment. I felt isolated, humiliated, as if the whole world were conspiring against me. My hands trembled, my stomach felt empty, and the urge to run away was overwhelming. But there was something inside me that still believed I could do something. For weeks, I felt lost. Through tears and sleepless nights, I relived every conversation with Bianca, every gesture of affection that now seemed like a lie. My body reacted with physical pain, insomnia, neck tension, palpitations. My mind filled with thoughts of revenge, but also with fear. Fear of losing myself completely, fear of failing, to expose the truth, fear of being seen as weak. I read and reread contracts, statements, emails. Each piece of evidence I found increased my anger, but also made me more determined. I realized it wasn't just a matter of lost love, it was justice. It was my dignity being attacked. The most devastating moment was receiving my own mother's disinheritance letter. Reading those cold, calculated words sent a chill down my spine. My family, the one I'd believed to be a safe haven, now treated me like an intruder, someone worthless. It was at that moment that I felt my entire life was crumbling. I could surrender, wallow in the pain, but there was a part of me that screamed, "You can't let them defeat you." Taking a deep breath, I realized I needed to transform all this pain into strength, and that the only way to rebuild my life was to face the situation head-on. After my mother's letter, everything felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I felt betrayed by everyone around me, and even my own confidence was shaken. Every time I tried to focus on work, my thoughts returned to Bianca and Rafael, to their smiles as they planned something behind my back. It was difficult to separate the professional from the personal, but I knew I had to use my expertise to transform the pain into action. I began reviewing every document from the family business, bank statements, invoices, contracts that I'd previously overlooked. My hands shook with anger and anxiety, but there was a thread of clarity amidst the confusion. I needed to prove that they weren't just betraying me in love, but also violating laws and financial trust. The following weeks were exhausting. I stayed up all night, analyzing data, comparing movements, searching for patterns that would confirm my suspicions. Sometimes I wanted to give up because every detail I uncovered was a blow to my heart. Realizing that my brother was complicit in this, that my ex-fiancé had planned it all with him, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness that left me unable to get out of bed. But there was also a growing sense of purpose within me. I needed to act, not out of blind revenge, but because if I did nothing, everything would go unpunished, and that would further erode my dignity. The fear was constant. Fear of making mistakes. Fear that my evidence wouldn't be enough. Fear that everything would fall apart before it even began. Every phone call with Gustavo, my friend and confidant, made me more aware of the risk. He brought me outside information, confirmed rumors, helped me understand the magnitude of what I was dealing with. There were days when I considered abandoning everything, moving to another city, erasing my past, because the pain was unbearable. But deep down, I knew that running away wouldn't bring me peace. My anger needed to be channeled constructively, and my financial experience gave me the chance to do so. As I investigated, I felt my body react in unexpected ways. The constant tension gave me chest pains and migraines. My stomach couldn't digest anything properly. Each discovery about the fraud left me physically exhausted, but also determined. I began writing detailed reports, assembling a dossier that could be used in a potential complaint. The feeling of seeing everything documented, of putting numbers and evidence on paper, gave me some control over my life that had seemed lost. It was as if I were building an invisible shield against betrayal and humiliation. The turning point came when I realized I couldn't depend on anyone to validate my pain or my decisions. My family was clearly on Raphael's side, and society expected me to simply swallow the humiliation. It was at that moment that I decided I would not only survive, but I would transform all this pain into justice. I began formally planning how to expose the irregularities, contact the authorities, and confront not only the emotional betrayal, but also the ethical and financial betrayal. Feeling that I had a concrete plan gave me the strength to breathe again and believe that there was still light at the end of the tunnel. Taking action was harder than I imagined. Each step required courage and calculation. I needed to be sure my evidence was solid before taking the matter to the authorities. The weeks turned into endless nights of analysis, checking accounts, contracts, tax records. My body felt exhausted, my mind in constant combustion, and yet there was a fire inside me that wouldn't let me give up. It was as if each spreadsheet, each document I reviewed was a piece of my heart rebuilding itself brick by brick. The anger still burned, but now it was transforming into focus, into discipline. In the midst of this process, my loneliness was overwhelming. Friends drifted away, family looked at me as if I were overreacting, and only Gustavo remained by my side, offering advice and reminding me that I wasn't crazy. Talking to him helped me breathe, organize my thoughts, and, most importantly, remember that my pain wasn't shame, it was injustice. Each encounter with him reinforced that I had a greater purpose than simply feeling angry. I was defending my dignity and, in a way, the truth about what was right and just. There were days when I thought about giving up completely. The pressure from my family, the weight of betrayal, and the fear of making a mistake were almost unbearable. I felt a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away. My hands were cold, my stomach was churning, and I had an overwhelming desire to hide from the world. But I always returned to the same thought: if I don't do this, who will? And what's more, if I give up, I'll be allowing them to triumph, allowing injustice to take hold. It was at that point that I realized that my overcoming depended on my own strength, on my ability to face everything, even alone. The decision to formalize my findings wasn't easy. I found lawyers, organized documents, and prepared detailed reports, and each step required patience and precision. It was a meticulous, almost surgical process, but at the same time, liberating. I felt every cell in my body react, a mixture of adrenaline and tension. Each time I completed a section of the dossier, I felt a twinge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could transform pain into justice and recover something that seemed lost. When I finally took everything to the authorities, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. I knew I was opening the door to irreversible changes in my family's life, but I also knew I could no longer live in the silence of humiliation. It was the first time in months that I felt my heart beat with something other than fear and anger. It beat with purpose. From that moment on, my struggle was no longer just internal, but also external. Each day brought new challenges, new confrontations, but also a new feeling. I was in control of my story, and that gave me the strength to carry on. The repercussions of my actions were swift and intense. Raphael and Bianca tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but it was impossible to hide the effects of the investigations. I felt a mixture of relief and a strange guilt. Relief at finally exposing the truth, guilt at disrupting the family balance, which in some ways was already rotten. Every phone call from the lawyer, every official notification made my heart race. I felt a constant physical tension, as if my body were constantly on alert, but also a mental clarity I'd never experienced before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something that truly mattered. My relationship with my parents changed radically. My mother, Helena, didn't hide her grief, and my father, Carlos, tried to downplay everything, saying I was overreacting. Every encounter with them was a test of patience and emotional control. My stomach churned, and anger surged in waves that I needed to learn to control. But with each confrontation, I realized I was stronger, more confident. I no longer needed their approval to validate my pain or my choices. This realization gave me a newfound freedom, a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Adriana, my aunt, became an unexpected source of support. Her criticism of family favoritism and her ability to see the situation fairly gave me strength. Talking to her reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who understood and supported my struggle. Every piece of advice, every word of encouragement was like an anchor amidst the emotional chaos I was experiencing. With her, I could vent without fear of judgment and little by little learn to deal with my anger and sadness in a healthier way. Gustavo continued to be my anchor to the outside world. He brought me updates on the progress of the investigation, warned me about Raphael and Bianca's possible strategies, and constantly reminded me of my worth. There were times when I felt like isolating myself completely, shutting out the outside world, but every message from him, every conversation, reminded me that I needed to stay strong. My mind was still haunted by painful memories, but I could now breathe deeply, feel my body relax, and realize that I was surviving all of this with dignity. The process of emotional reconstruction wasn't linear. There were days of victory, followed by profound setbacks. I felt ashamed of allowing myself moments of joy, afraid of opening up to anyone again, and insecure about every step I took. But I began to focus on the small achievements, organizing my finances, resuming old hobbies, rebuilding lost friendships. Each small victory, even if imperceptible to others, reminded me that I could bounce back. My life still bore scars, but I was learning to deal with them without them defining who I was. Over time, I realized the pain was still there, but it no longer dominated me. Raphael and Bianca faced the legal consequences of their fraud, and while this brought some relief, my true victory lay in reclaiming my own life. I began making decisions that previously seemed impossible. I chose new career paths, reconnected with friends who had drifted apart, and, most importantly, learned to prioritize my emotional health. I felt my body relax in unprecedented ways, my sleep improve, and my stomach finally settle. Each step seemed small, but it was significant. I learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing injustices. I learned that setting boundaries is essential and that my dignity doesn't depend on anyone's approval, not even family or ex-lovers. Looking back, I clearly see how betrayal and humiliation were, in a way, catalysts for my transformation. Every tear, every sleepless night, every self-doubt shaped me to be stronger, more aware, and more resilient. Today, I can remember the pain without feeling the despair that consumed me before. One of the hardest parts was accepting that some relationships were irreparably broken. My mother and father continued to show favoritism, and that was painful. But I realized that I can't control other people's views or behavior. I can only control my choices, my reactions, and my dedication to building a life of integrity and honesty. Learning to accept this was liberating. My body and mind finally found a more relaxed rhythm, a sense of peace that seemed impossible in the first months after the betrayal. Today, I feel more complete, even though I carry scars. I discovered that I am capable of transforming pain into action, of transforming humiliation into justice, of transforming loneliness into self-knowledge. Every decision I made, even on the darkest nights, brought me here. I can look to the future with hope, knowing that my life will no longer be determined by what others did to me, but by what I choose to build each day. The feeling of freedom, autonomy, and control over my own story is something I wouldn't trade for anything. If there's one lesson I want to share, it's that it's possible to rise again even when it seems like all is lost. Pain can be a brutal teacher, but it can also be a catalyst for change, strength, and authenticity. I learned that facing reality, seeking genuine support, and using our skills strategically can take us beyond revenge, beyond sadness, to a place of true overcoming. It wasn't easy, and there are still moments of pain, but today I can confidently say, I overcame betrayal, injustice, and most importantly, I recovered myself.